we are in the condition we are in the state of ignorance we are in the state of war, in the state of economic depression, in the state of depletion of the resources of our planet because of the greed of psychopaths who thought they could create their own reality. Well, look at the reality they created.
You're listening to Behind the Headlines on the Sott Radio Network. The world for people who think.
Hi, and welcome to Behind the Headlines on the Sott Radio Network. I'm Joe Quinn, and my co-host this week, as usual, is Niall Bradley.
Hi, everyone.
It's just the two of us this week. Harrison has gone off to be a monk. No, Harrison actually has taken off to do some reporting for us. So he won't be back for a while. It's back to the usual dynamic duo.
That's right.
With Niall as Batman and me as Catwoman. Anyway.
Joe, we need some answers here.
What are the questions?
What the hell was Recipe Erdogan thinking when he ordered a Turkish jet to shoot down a Russian jet inside Syria on Tuesday last week?
What was he thinking? Well, first of all, there's a question over whether or not he ordered anything.
But he pretty much owned it right after.
Right. But here's the problem. He owned it. And I kind of use this analogy. I'm not saying this is exactly the truth, but we can explore it and people can answer the question for themselves, what's on the base of it. But there's a lot more details around this going into history and going kind of forward even that need to be talked about in terms of trying to understand what went on, because what went on, as you just said, Niall, was extremely stupid, or appeared to be a very stupid thing, and still appears to be a very stupid thing that the Turkish government, or the Turkish Prime Minister, President, or whatever did. They shoot this plane down. Something shoots this plane down. For a start, there's obviously no pictures, no images, no video of any F-16 shooting down the plane. Okay, let's assume that that's true. It was shot down by a plane. There are plenty of Turkish air bases just over the border in Turkey from where an F-16 could have gone up and shot it down, probably from Turkish airspace. A real sneaky, as Putin said, stab in the back from a distance of 5-7 kilometers away. They just
apparently done stealthily because the Russian didn't pick up anything coming their way.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, they did it. Maybe the Russians weren't looking for it. They certainly weren't. I mean, you have to remember, this wasn't a Russian jet, as they keep calling it. Okay, it was a jet in the sense that it's a jet engine, but it was a bomber. This wasn't a fighter aircraft. This was an Su-24, it's a strategic bomber. It's designed to target the ground. It's designed for bombing, not for fighting or for engaging in kind of dogfights, and therefore it wouldn't have the same kind of electronics to engage in that kind of air-to-air combat. So it was effectively a soft target, an easy target for an F-16, for example, a fighter jet, which is a fighter jet, to target. So a missile was fired from probably inside Turkey. Kind of standard range is about 5-7 kilometers away. You would launch one of those missiles at this bomber, and it would just, hits it from behind, and down it goes. The question is, why immediately afterwards? Well, immediately afterwards there was silence, effectively. All we heard was that Erdogan, the Turkish government, ran screaming to NATO and wrote a quick letter to the UN.
Which got leaked, in quotes.
Which got leaked supposedly by WikiLeaks. So their immediate response is, to me, oh my God, what the hell just happened? Quick, cover our asses. Let's go and do something about this. Seems an unusual response from someone who supposedly did this coldly and calmly with what you would expect to be an anticipation of a reaction. And so that's the first thing. The next thing is then within 24 hours, Erdogan and his prime minister are getting all kind of belligerent. We're not saying sorry. You say sorry. We have to protect our airspace. We'll protect the...
It's your fault.
Yeah, it's all your fault, Russia. Blah, blah, blah. So really rubbing salt in the wound, a very stupid thing to do in that sense, although understandable, because when you take make an aggressive move against someone who has the potential to respond to you, I suppose you have a choice. You either keep the ante up or you back down, and you got to weigh up what's the best option there. I mean, what's in your best interest? It's a fait accompli. It's done. The analogy I've been using is just proposing this scenario. The analogy I've been using is Russia and Turkey are standing facing each other. Russia turns its back for a moment. Someone comes in, stabs Russia in the back, and then sticks the bloody knife in Turkey's hand and runs away. Russia turns around and sees Turkey standing there with a bloody knife in its hand. What's Turkey going to say?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
it wasn't me.
It wasn't me. Or are they going to say, yeah, frickin' Russia, you deserved that because you were doing stuff. But then within the past couple of days, we've seen Erdogan flip-flopping again and saying...
it wasn't so bad, was it?
Not just not so bad. He said that he's saddened by the fact, because of the shootdown, and that he wishes it never happened.
Mm.
I mean, is this all just posturing? If so, you're not keeping your story straight here, Erdogan. I mean, you're either shirt-fronting, as the former Australian Prime Minister would have said, shirt-fronting Putin, or you're not, or you're striking a conciliatory note and you want to get over this, you know? I mean, what is it? That whole thing was just so ridiculous and insane. It's hard to figure out, to make any sense of it and to understand what the motivation was here. Obviously, Russia has responded with by passing effectively sanctions against Turkey on several different fronts that apparently is going to hurt Turkey to a certain extent economically. Russia has upped, at the very day afterwards, it upped its bombing in that region. So if look at it this way, this Su-24, these jets are flying and they're bombing a particular area up there in the western corner of Syria on the Turkish border, at Turkmen Mountain, where supposedly Turkmen live. The very next day, this plane is shot down by the Turkish. You think, well, Turkey didn't like the fact that Russia was bombing that particular area. So they shoot down the plane. A very easily anticipated response is that Russia is going to continue to bomb more heavily that place the next day. Bad idea. Turks are stupid, right? I mean, what a ridiculous thing. You couldn't anticipate that. Mm. The other possibility is, as has been said, Russia had been previously at least bombing the oil trucks that have been much talked about. These oil trucks from ISIS, stolen ISIS oil from Syria, that are supposedly, according to Putin anyway,
that's
these
right,
long 36, 37, 40 kilometer long trains effectively of oil trucks coming from Syria and going into Turkey. Putin's like, really? You didn't know about this?
He apparently showed people at the G20, there's photos his fighters took from 6,000 meters up.
Right. He's bombing these oil trucks as well. Turkey's not happy with that. Let's say someone in Turkey is not happy about that. So
supposedly Erdogan's brother is involved with this
son.
His son, excuse me, right.
So his son is supposedly, but this is all kind of speculation, but it's obvious that someone in Turkey is handling stolen oil from Syria. Stolen ISIS oil. Oil that ISIS has stolen from Syria is being channeled into Turkey, and the Russians are bombing it, which are pretty easy targets. I mean, not only are they more or less civilian trucks, they're not military vehicles, they're also full of flammable liquid. So it must be fun to bomb those. I would have fun bombing those. So that's been talked about as well, obviously, that this could be another reason why this was a red line, a bridge too far for the Turkish government. You're bombing our money, basically. But at the same time, the problem here is that any of these the analysis in this direction, it's really clear that you're going to piss off Russia. I mean, if you any Russian plane you shoot down that is engaged in a particular bombing of a particular area, if you shoot that plane down, you have to be an idiot to not expect that what you're simply going to do is incur further and more extensive bombing of that area.
Mm-hmm. They apparently leveled the area where the Turkmen were the next day.
Right. So, take your pick, really. The Turks are idiots and were just desperate and shot down this plane because they were angry in the heat of the moment. Stop bombing our oil trucks, stop bombing our Turkmen. And then they go, oh, crap, we shouldn't have done that. Good job. Okay. So it doesn't sound like the kind of action that a military political leadership would take.
Mm-hmm.
So then we look at the results. So you've got the stupid explanation. Turkey's just stupid, because that's what most people seem to be going with in one sense or another. But look at the result. The best thing to do in these situations is look at the result. What is the broad result of this shoot down of the Russian plane? Apart from the bombing, Russia's bombing of continued bombing, etc. The broad result is a souring of relationship between Turkey and Russia,
which was doing as well as up to
Putin himself said
South Stream going through Turkey last year.
Pipelines going from Russia through Turkey towards Europe. It had been planned. It hadn't been finalized yet, but the Turkish Stream, effectively it was called, was a new pipeline coming from. This was after the EU, on the orders of NATO in 2014, cancelled South Stream, which was meant to run through the Caspian Sea into Bulgaria. The EU put pressure on Bulgaria to stop that, to screw the Russians over. So the Russians said, okay, Turkey, let's do a deal. Let's run straight through Turkey and over to Greece that way. Turkey said, okay. This is just last year. They've been talking about it. Even this year, earlier this year, they've been finalizing details on it. And Putin himself said that he described it as a stab in the back by accomplices of terrorists, right? And they take actions against Turkey. Now, just because he said accomplices of terrorists doesn't mean he was referring necessarily to Turkey or to the Turkish government.
But he certainly led people on to believe so.
Right. Well, yes, by taking action against Turkey. He also, what he said is, we don't have a problem with the Turkish people, but we have questions about the Turkish government. What does that mean?
And he referred to the Islamization of Turkey.
Right. Well, what does that mean? So this is all very cryptic, as usual, from Putin. But he said that it was a stab in the back because, as far as Putin's concerned, Turkey was an ally, or more or less an ally, he said. They had good relationships and it was more or less or close to an ally of Russia. By shooting down this plane, Turkey basically destroys or goes a long way to destroying that relationship. Why would Turkey do that? What's in it for Turkey?
So we've got Turkey is stupid on one hand, or someone else is extremely cunning.
Right. Well, who would want to thwart or destroy the relationship between Turkey and Russia? Who benefits? Who has been trying to destroy relationships between Russia and everybody else over the past 4 or 5 years?
Washington.
Okay, that's pretty transparent. The U.S. has, under NATO and as the U.S. in itself, has many aircraft in air bases in Turkey. We're saying the missile was fired from Turkey. The U.S., the Brits as well, have been flying planes, aircraft from Turkey into Syria and into Iraq. So the question of who owned this plane is an open question, because it could have been Turkish, it could have been American, it could have been British.
Even if it was under a Turkish flag, remember back to our discussion with the NATO guy, I've forgotten his name. I remember his comment about how when you buy weapons in the NATO system, you also get the NATO software and so on and so forth,
right,
up to the point of being able to remotely have control over that weaponry.
Right. So I don't see, unless you go with the Turkey is crazy, Erdogan's nuts, or he acted irrationally in the heat of the moment, which is more or less that he's nuts. You are going, if you're unless you're going to go with that explanation, which doesn't seem plausible, you're going to have to look at a kind of, to a certain extent, a false flag. That doesn't necessarily mean, well, okay, yes, a false flag of some description. Effectively, Turkey's hand was forced, and Turkey was forced to, in the aftermath of doing it, to make a decision. There's a few interesting things that I want to mention. There's a picture. If you're listening to this show, I know we put up a lot of pictures on the player there, but there's a picture of a group of guys in front of a flag.
You can forward through the image banner.
This guy is called, the guy we're talking about, he is in this image. His name's Alparslan Selik. He was the guy who was on TV, was recorded after the shoot down of the Russian plane. He has a bit of a goatee beard. He's had a scarf on his head and a goatee beard. And he was the one who was kind of grandstanding and gloating over the shoot down of this plane and claiming that he shot down, that him and his friends shot at the two Russian pilots. And he even went as far as saying that they had killed both of them, which wasn't true. This guy was clearly there to make matters worse. It's one thing to shoot down a Russian jet in contested airspace, let's say, or under a claim of that it had infiltrated Turkish airspace.
Mm-hmm.
And for the pilots to eject and them to be left alone. It's another thing for one of them to be murdered as he parachutes down.
A war crime.
That is a war crime, and it really pushes the kind of declaration of war, extremely aggressive act against Russia, really across the limit. So my analysis of it will be at this point that that aspect of this event, of the shoot down, the shooting of one of the pilots, was a key aspect to it. So I'm kind of leaving it open here to a certain extent by saying that it's possible Erdogan, this is a deeper conspiracy theory than the one I just presented, other than the false flag. It's possible that Erdogan and his government was aware or even sanctioned the shooting down of the plane, but was not aware or had not sanctioned the murder of the Russian pilot, which made matters much worse.
Indeed, because on the same day of the event, they did say they were going to try and recover the two pilots.
Right, exactly.
And then it later emerged, well, actually you can't now, one of them's dead.
Right.
And somebody's been shooting at the Russian rescue team.
He was deliberately shot. And shooting at the Russian rescue team, not only did they shoot down the plane, but when rescue helicopters came, Russian helicopters came to rescue, one of them was attacked and was blown up, and one of the Marines on that rescue helicopter was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes from a shoot down of a Russian plane by Turkish Air Force
that might plausibly be put down to fog of war /
exactly,
yeah,
to the deliberate murder of two Russian servicemen. That puts it in a whole different ballpark.
That's
I would
someone's
say.
Putting a knife in Russia, twisting it, and then giving it to Erdogan.
Right, exactly. So the point here is who this guy was.
Yes, what were his connections?
This guy who claimed to have shot the Russian pilot, or was responsible for shooting the Russian pilot. In the picture that we're talking about, he is seen with a group of men. And behind them, there's a flag. It's a blue flag. And most you can see on it is a white crescent moon. But just behind his shoulder, you can also see what appears to be maybe the edge of a star. A lot of people have said that this is an example of, this flag is effectively the flag of a group called the Grey Wolves. The Grey Wolves is a group, effectively a NATO Gladio type group that was Turkey's version of NATO's kind of Gladio, or paramilitary organizations that NATO spread around European countries after the end of the Second World War to effectively keep all of Europe from falling into under the influence of the Russians, to keep them under NATO's banner.
Ostensibly, in the event of a Russian invasion of Europe, for them to come out from underground, but effectively,
but they
what happened in practice?
They did preemptively.
Yes.
They did that preemptively. Any sign of a drift in any direction, anybody who was seen as being in any way independent-minded or even communist or socialist, they were targeted. Politicians and any groups were targeted, and the populations of European countries were terrorized effectively by phony. A lot of these groups were actually phony leftist groups who would carry out bombings, etc., and claim that they were leftist groups, but they were actually NATO groups to demonize the left, to demonize any kind of communist because or socialist or independence in Europe. So this applied to Turkey as well, very much so. Mm-hmm. These groups were in Turkey, and one of them is called the Grey Wolves. They're actually associated with the National Democratic Movement, which is the third biggest political party in Turkey right now, which are kind of radical right-wing nationalist organization.
This party is very much still active, although the paramilitary wing presumably is a close file.
Well, no, they never went away.
Okay.
They're still around, and they've played a part in Turkish politics for a long time, right up until the present day. So this group, this guy who shot down the Russian pilot, he's standing in front of a flag, and that flag, a blue flag with a crescent moon, it's similar to a flag, the flag of this Grey Wolves, which is a blue flag with a crescent moon and a howling wolf in the middle of the crescent moon. Now, but he doesn't have a howling wolf in his. His is the sky blue flag with a white crescent moon and a star. That star is that flag. That star is the flag of East Turkestan.
Ah.
In the image, you see also that I think there's four of them. Two of them they're doing their jihadi one finger salute, which is, there's only one God but Allah, etc. But the two guys, this guy who shot down the pilot of the Russian plane and a friend beside him, they have the devil's horns salute sticking up, right, which is used all around the world for different reasons. What he's using it for is as a symbol of the Grey Wolves. Those are the two horns sticking up are the Grey Wolves' ears. And of course, there's not a lot between the East Turkestan or the movement for an independent East Turkestan and these Grey Wolves, because basically they're the same thing. This group that I'm talking about, the Grey Wolves, and this third biggest political party in Turkey, the Grey Wolves being the paramilitary wing of it, they espouse right-wing nationalist Turkish ideology, which is basically a new Turkish empire, effectively going from Turkey all the way across into Central Asia, right over to basically into China,
East Turkmenistan,
to Jiangxing,
goes into China.
Right, East Turkestan, or East Turkestan is an area in China, right on the border with Afghanistan. For example, if you look at a map, you'll see that Afghanistan has a very small, little thin land border with China. And if you just follow that little channel from Afghanistan into China, you're in East Turkestan, which makes it pretty clear, at least gives you one good reason why the U.S. invaded and have occupied Afghanistan and still occupy Afghanistan to this day. But anyway, it's a very strange story because you have these guys in Turkey, and thousands of miles away, they are lobbying for.
That's right. They have
the freedom.
A powerful lobby in Washington.
Thousands of miles away in China, they are lobbying, or they are fighting effectively for the freedom of East Turkestan, which is part of China. And Jiangxing, I think, is the Chinese name for the region. So anyway, this organization that espouses Turkic kind of revolutionary movement to unite all Turkic-speaking people, which is obviously Turkey. There's some of them in Azerbaijan, then all of the stans of the former Soviet Republic,
including Turkmenistan,
Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, all of them, and also
a chunk of China,
and into China. They all want to. These guys want to unite those peoples in one new Turkic empire, Turkestan empire or something. That's their ideology, and that's their flag, and this guy sitting in front of it. So this guy who shot down the Russian plane is a member of this organization. And so it's not,
and wants to be seen as such. I mean, if they're going to have a flag
right
in front of the TV.
But this Grey Wolves group, they played a serious part. Just to clarify for people here, what we're talking about is the guy on TV who claimed he shot down or shot the Russian pilot after the Russian plane was shot down is a member of the Grey Wolves, which is a Turkish paramilitary organization that is known to have been effectively a NATO-controlled group in Turkey. Throughout the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, they're basically murderers. They killed, people say that there's claims that they've killed up to 6,000 people over that period of time through bombings, massacres, all sorts of things. They were a real destabilizing force in Turkey. Mm. They engaged or played direct roles in coups in Turkey over those years.
Yeah.
So, and they're known, and it has been talked about repeatedly in the Western press, but definitely inside Turkey, and there's been investigations, public investigations into this group in Turkey, and they're very well known as being effectively controlled by NATO, or come under the NATO umbrella. This guy who is basically who is standing there giving interviews to the media about shooting down the pilot is a member. But one of the other things that this Grey Wolf did was that they fought in Chechnya. They fought in several different places where NATO had an interest. One of them being Chechnya, and they fought on the Chechen separatist side in the first and second Chechen wars.
That's why the Russians said this area is riddled with Chechen terrorists.
Exactly. Uh-huh. Why was Russia bombing that area? Because Russia had intelligence, at least, that the people that they said at the very beginning, that Russia said at the very beginning of their airstrikes, that one of the reasons they were, well, I think this was largely their only reason. Of course, they're there to support Assad, but their main reason was that they were terrorists, jihadi terrorists in Syria who posed a threat to Russia in terms of them being able to go to Russia after being in Syria and attack Russia. Now, the day that the Russian plane is shot down by an F-16 piloted by someone, there are these guys, these Turkmen or Turkic men in Syria shooting down and killing a Russian pilot. And these people have a history, the organization has a history of fighting in Chechnya against the Russians. So
the plot thickens. There's another connection, isn't there? This guy who's spoken from the camera, this Grey Wolf, this lone wolf, he's not a lone wolf, of course, he's connected. He's very connected. He's the son of a former mayor of a town in Turkey.
Right, of a town in Turkey, yeah.
And this mayor also was renowned as a right-wing...
Right. I think he was a member of that MHP party.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this guy is up to his neck. He's a fully on-board, signed-up member of NATO's paramilitary organization inside Turkey. And he's there on scene shooting at the Russian pilot who's falling down. I mean, to me...
And internationally, he's therefore posing as a rebel against the Assad regime.
Right.
Moderate rebel, in quotes.
Right. Now, where it gets complicated, Erdogan's and that clique within Turkey, what their motivation is. Do they want to protect these people? Possibly, yes. Not because they want to use them to attack Russia as jihadis or anything like that, but they want to have people that they can that are in some way loyal to them I don't even know if these guys are loyal to the Erdogan government, because certainly the Grey Wolves are not. They're affiliated with a party that's in opposition to Erdogan's AK party. But if Erdogan's explanation of if his claim of having shot down or having been part of shooting down or having sanctioned the shooting down the Russian plane was because well, he didn't give a good explanation, did he? I mean, what we're assuming here is that Russia was bombing somewhere along that kind of Syrian-Turkish border, bombing people that Erdogan didn't want him to bomb. Now, Erdogan in general does not want. He's obviously, one thing we can say is that he's obviously he wants to get rid of the Assad government. He doesn't like the Syrian government. He's been fully supportive of the jihadis and the overthrow of the Assad government for a long time.
So his interest with the others converges.
His interest with the West converges.
Saudis, Qatar, and so on.
But Erdogan has, and the people behind Erdogan have their own interest in preventing the Kurds, the Kurds in particular, from gaining any ground or staking a claim to any kind of independent country, etc., or independent region in that area, because the Kurds have a long history of obviously conflict with the Turkish government and wanting their own independent country, their own Kurdistan. Kurdistan, in theory, would incorporate parts of Turkey, parts of Syria, parts of Iraq, and even parts of Iran if they could get it. So if you look at a map again and imagine a circle cutting off pieces of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and back to Turkey, let's leave Iran out of it. Let's say Turkey, Syria, and Iraq in a circle.
It's a fairly big country.
It would be if they could get some of this. Here's the last thing. The last thing that obviously that any Turk wants, and it fought a long war with the Kurds to prevent them from getting any kind of independence. That doesn't mean that, I think, is where the Turks and the West part company.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. has been continually supporting the Kurds in their fight against ISIS. Israel is a long-term supporter of the Kurds.
The U.S. also supported the Kurds in their fight against Saddam Hussein,
right,
back in the early 90s.
Right. When you talk about the Grand Chessboard, Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard, or the Great Game, whatever you want to call it, why did Brzezinski use that analogy of Grand Chessboard? Well, because it's a game of chess, right? But if you think about chess, what do you do in chess? You move pieces to block your opponent.
And you keep in mind several moves going on,
right?
Potentially.
In the past, their moving of the pieces on the Grand Chessboard has been to destabilize countries and overthrow governments, etc. And they get control of the board effectively by taking control of certain countries, etc. But there's another possibility, which is like as you move your pieces on the board, for example, you're creating something new in that square on the board as a block. If they were able to create a Kurdistan, or to create the conditions where a Kurdistan could be created, as I just described in that area, you would have a country, and if they certainly hope to control it and for it to be aligned with the West, some kind of autonomous Kurdistan, they would have a very effective block for Iranian or Iraqi or Syrian gas or oil going through into Turkey, and therefore into the West. They would effectively control a chunk of land right at the point. They would have created a new country effectively right at the point where a lot of gas and oil pipelines would be transiting. So the U.S. strategy, the Western strategy, has been to fund and train the jihadis to get rid of Syria. This was the beginning of get rid of the Syrian government. This has been the plan at the beginning. But as it evolved, and Turkey was on board with that because everybody wanted to get rid of Assad, Turkey then, as things started to become clear maybe to Turkey and they saw which way the wind was blowing, they're now at this point dividing or changing, splitting in terms of their their goals and what they want. They're diverging from the West. Yeah.
The next day, there was an airstrike on a convoy coming from Turkey into Syria.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be sure, but there was a photo of one of the boxes that fell out of one of these trucks in the convoy, and it looked like the same insignia. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I saw a wolf, but it was the same light color blue, mm-hmm. crescent and star. Mm-hmm. And that's opening another little can of worms that probably ties into this. The convoy was under the aegis of the IHH, which is a well-known humanitarian organization, NGO, Turkish NGO.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing's kind of...
nobody has, as far as I know, nobody's owned up to bombing that convoy, but there was claimed that there was not full of humanitarian aid, but weapons mm-hmm. heading into Syria.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is by definition and almost necessarily a very complicated situation and very hard to tease out because you have shifting loyalties and changing loyalties even from day to day almost, or from week to week. And people are becoming more aware of, let's say, that the West, effectively, because all of these regime changes are ultimately motivated and launched from the West, from the center of evil in this world, which is more or less Washington and the city of London. So when they come into a country and begin a kind of overthrow like they have in Syria, the countries around may be on board at the beginning, but as things start to develop, I mean, no one should ever trust the empire, basically, because they will screw you over in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, arrogance and hubris among the regional powers might lead them to think that they can, if they're aware of if they're smart enough to not trust the empire, they may be thinking that they can screw them over or get what they want out of it. I mean, that's
which may have been Erdogan's turn to Putin last year.
Right.
I'm going to play both things. Just to go back on the Greater Turkic Empire, mm-hmm. I can just imagine this has happened before, where to get somebody on board with a program, in this case, destabilizing Syria, get rid of Assad, go into Turkish ears, mm-hmm. you know, they let it be known that this is a possible future for you. They don't ever maybe promise them exactly, mm-hmm. but and then they show them evidence of this reality being a very real possibility. Mm-hmm. So the Turks will know that the East Turkmenistan / Xinjiang lobby in Washington has the ears of very powerful people, mm-hmm. and therefore has American support. Okay, so that's our other end over there is covered, and they've been led into something by being led to believe that they will win this great, glorious national goal out of it, when they never had any intention. No, or it could be ditched in a heartbeat.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit pie in the sky for them to have this ideology, this Turkic-speaking people's ideology, where they're going to unite some Turkic empire from Turkey all the way across all the way across to China, basically. Not contiguous all the way, but in a lot of those stands and into China and stuff, you would have some Turkic empire. But I think Erdogan would have been promised something, certainly in the near future, would have been allowed to believe that with the destruction of Turkey, he would have got a chunk of with the destruction of Syria, with the removal of the Syrian government and the change in the Syrian government, Turkey would have got a chunk of Syria over the border. You would have expanded Turkish territory. But as it turns out, I think what may be happening is that in recent times, let's say, or even now, the Turkish government is realizing that it's actually the opposite. That what the plan of the empire is to take away some Turkish territory by creating a new Kurdistan, which they will control. I mean, this is one of the reasons why Iraq, the whole plan for Iraq going back to the late 1980s was to break Iraq up into three separate parts. Mm-hmm. The typical kind of Sunni-Shia divide, which they exacerbate and make a reality on the ground, but certainly they were focused very much on Kurds in the north, since, and we're talking here for 30 years ago, they were planning to break Iraq up and create and give the Kurds an autonomous region or even their own separate chunk of land in Iraq. So in 2003, you have the invasion of Iraq by the US, the occupation for 10 years. As they are still, I mean, the US is more or less still in Iraq, but as they leave Iraq, around 2010, 2011 or something, suddenly Libya and Syria kick off more or less at the same time. So they've done their best to destabilize and create the conditions in Iraq where they can, push for the breakup of Iraq in some way, or if necessary, they can ignite that a little bit again to justify it. And at the same time, right after they've done that, they're in Libya and then straight into Syria, and the goal seems to be the same thing. So I'm looking here at that's why I'm tending towards the Kurdish aspect, which is very much has been supported by Israel and seems to be the agenda of the West. And Turkey is set to lose in that scenario. But it's a very dangerous game to play because inside Turkey, the NATO and the West have for decades fomented this ultra-Turkish nationalist movement, paramilitary nationalist movement that demands not only the safeguarding of the integrity of Turkish territory and culture, but the expansion of it into these other Turkish regions. So it's classic, isn't it? With people playing these empire, agents of empire, playing two games at once, playing opposite games at once. It's very much in keeping with the way they do things, But it's just a very strange situation where you have, there's very clear links, basically, is what I'm saying. There's very clear links to the guy who was shooting at that Russian pilot and NATO's Gladio stay-behind operation in Turkey. And as we were saying earlier on, the thing that made the shoot-down of the Russian plane particularly bad was the murder of the pilot and the other guy. Of course, the helicopter that was shot on the day afterwards that came to rescue them, that was blown up with an American anti-tank missile that was delivered directly to these people, delivered to NATO operatives, basically. And of course, when we say NATO operatives, we don't mean conscious NATO operatives necessarily. These are people who have been funded, encouraged, trained, armed by NATO for decades and who have their own ideology. NATO comes in and identifies ideologies and fundy, religious, cultural, whatever, nut jobs in any part of the world, and then takes them to wherever its current battleground is and gives them a load of training and then sends them back to destabilize that region. These guys are going to do it because they're fundy nut jobs. But that doesn't change the fact that they're fully under the control of NATO and they can be stopped or cancelled or withdrawn at any time they want, because the only reason they get to go anywhere is under the aegis of NATO. But the thing is that these, back in, I think it was earlier, the Thailand bombing. There was a bombing in Thailand earlier this year. And
a month ago or so.
Yeah, it was just a month ago. Was it just a month ago?
A month or two, maybe.
The guy who did that was a Turk, affiliated with these Grey Wolves.
When you say Turk, you mean not Turkish national?
Turkish national, yeah.
Oh.
And
arrested in China afterwards, or in Thailand?
Right.
Okay.
And he is one of these people who are pushing for freedom or independence for East Turkestan, which is in
China.
Let's call it Xinjiang, or not Xinjiang, because it's not
Xinjiang, I think.
Xinjiang, sorry. Xinjiang is someone else.
Yes, it is.
It's a bad name, East Turkestan, because it sounds like it's over in eastern Turkey somewhere. This is in China. But it's because of this linguistic group of supposedly Turkic-speaking people that spread from Turkey all the way over into Western China. So
1,500 years ago. We're talking a long. There used to be a country or an empire that was kind of Central Asia.
Right, but this
a long time ago.
Right, but this is classic NATO destabilization, getting fundamentalist, nationalistic, jihadi nut jobs or whatever to put pressure on the enemies of the empire, which is China and Russia. Of course, and these people are central to that operation, to that goal, and that's what they're used for. I mean, when you look at it, NATO has had for a long time this almost unimaginable network of nut job jihadi fundies who subscribe to, in the most part, some form of, or primarily most of them, fundamentalist Islam. But in this case, it's Turkic nationalism that spreads from Turkey all the way over to China. And they have been taken, I mean, there was that story from the tie-in with this bombing in Thailand is that Thailand, earlier this year, sent, I think it was 10, what they call terrorists, from Thailand that they had stopped in Thailand, back to China. And they were from this East Turkestan, what's the name in Chinese? Xinjiang area. And the Thai government sent them back because they were where were they on their way to? They were on their way to Turkey and Syria to fight with jihad in Syria, fight the Assad government. Well, these are guys from China coming from China through Thailand to Syria, and they get sent back. These guys were effectively this kind of grey wolf Turkic nationalist movement. They were affiliates of that, and they were coming to cut their teeth in Syria and then be sent back to China to carry out terror attacks in China. So Thailand stops them and sends them back to China. Then this bombing in Thailand that happened, like you said, a couple of months ago, was carried out supposedly as punishment, as revenge against the Thai government for sending these guys back to China. The same East Turkestan independence movement was, I think it was last year, there was a terror attack somewhere in China where a few people got out with big long knives and started and chopped up about 30 people and injured 100 more. Those people are the East Turkestan people who are associated, who are on supposedly the same group as this guy who shot down the Russian pilot.
Right. Well, before Syria, there was Afghanistan. There were reports, I remember, 10 years ago. Even Western journals reported on it, that there were guys coming from Afghanistan into China, but they were originally from there. Right. You see, you've got double thing going on here. There's not only the hook, the motivational hook, they get them based on Turkic/nationalist/ethnic affiliations across Central Asia, but the whole area is also Muslim.
Right.
So if you can't get them for jihad, you get them for your country and the flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's the whole thing's, it's basically continuation of the kind of Cold War, NATO's Cold War, effectively against Russia at containing Russia, and now it's been expanded to China. And the next battleground, it seems, that they're building up is that Central Asian area of those stands that were former Soviet republics, and obviously Afghanistan is one of them. And that is designed to broaden this long-term anti-Russian front aimed at pushing Russia back and thwarting Russia at every opportunity. It's now also being expanded to include, or it has been, it was planned probably 10, 15 years ago, expanded to include stopping China or destabilizing China, putting pressure on China. And that's what these people do. They carry out terror attacks against anybody they deem to be their enemy.
For 2 weeks before the Russians went into Syria on the last day of September, they held the biggest military exercise since, somebody said, the 60s, maybe the 70s, ever by anyone. So this is the Russian military, under their aegis. But also all the stands were involved and a couple of other Central Eurasian countries. The text or theme for the war games was to repel a cross-Eurasian advance of jihadists coming from the south to the north. Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole band, the war games took place over a vast swathe of Kazakhstan, which is massive, into Russia, across much of southern Siberia. It took place in many areas. Mm-hmm. So they were simulating precisely a war game scenario, right, as you've just outlined.
Right, and you'd think that that's overkill for a bunch of jihadis, right? Mm-hmm. But look at the plan for Russia, or look at the plan for Syria. The goal there is to spread these jihadis in another kind of ISIS kind of configuration into these former Soviet republics to overthrow the government, to take over the government, and then to use all of the weapons that the US has been trying to foist on these countries to wage war on Russia. And if they even got that far, that would be good enough, because they would have pushed Russia back. They want to push Russia back to its borders and contain it. They want to isolate and cut Russia off from the rest of the world, and the same with China. Accept on and only do business with them and allow them to do business, or create the conditions where they cannot do business except on Washington and NATO's terms.
So when Putin says at the beginning of this Russian military campaign in Syria, we're doing this over there so we don't have to do this here, unlike rationale being used by Western leaders away off in their islands in the North Atlantic, he actually means it because he actually sees it coming.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, he sees. I mean, they're preparing for it well in advance, and not only that, but they're in Syria trying to cut it off, trying to smother it in the cradle, effectively. Yeah. So Russia is very clearly in the broad picture, in the big long-term picture, and it's not even that long-term. Russia is protecting its national interests, its border, effectively. Protecting its border and its interests with other countries on its border, which the U.S. has been trying to stop for so long. I mean, it is quite complicated, but in terms of what Turkey is trying to do, Turkey's interests in Syria are to stick with the original plan, which was get rid of Assad and bring in some government that everybody except Russia and Iran and Iraq can deal with, that everybody West, NATO countries will like. That's what they want to have in Syria.
Presumably they never wanted to blitz their relations with Russia, so they would maybe hope they could work out some kind of a deal or compromise with Russia down the line.
Right.
Happened.
They never expected Russia to do what it did in Syria, which is start a bombing campaign in Syria.
But even after that, I can imagine until 6 days ago, they hoped somewhere to strike an accommodation. Yeah. But Turkey's playing a very dangerous game, because Turkey is infiltrated and riven with Western powers and influences in the form of the NATO stay-behind groups and a political party that's directly affiliated with them, and paramilitary groups able to, for example, overthrow Erdogan. And Turkey wants to stick with the original plan. Let's just get rid of Assad and put in a new government, and we'll get a chunk of we'll control the border area at least, and maybe get a bit of Syria that'll be under our control, and then everybody's happy, right? NATO and its Gulf ally states will all be happy, because it'll be a compliant regime in Syria, and we can cut off European dependency on Russian gas by having Qatari gas, and at the same time we'll cut off Iran and Iraq. Iran won't be able to supply any of its gas. There's a major field there in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, of the Pars gas field, which is shared between Qatar and Iran. Qatar wants to funnel that all the way up into Europe through a compliant Syrian government, and Qatar, obviously, along with the West, want to stop Iran from exploiting it. Well, it can exploit it, but it's not allowed to bring it through, and the only way to be able to bring it through to Europe would be through Syria. But if Syria is gone in terms of Assad and we've got a NATO client regime in there, well, then it's going to go with Qatar, right? And Iran gets cut off. At the same time, Iran looking east, if Iran wants to supply China, and China wants to be supplied by Iran, in that direction, they have to go through Afghanistan or the stands, where NATO is now in the process of fomenting a jihadi revolution there as well. And NATO occupies Afghanistan. The most direct route from Iran to China will be through Afghanistan. They're not going to go through Pakistan because, well, there's no way through there basically anyway. And Pakistan is Pakistan intelligence and the government are pretty much aligned with the West. But anyway, when you go through that direction, then you have to go through India, and to get up to China, you have to go through the Himalayas. So the only real way is north of that, through the stands, through Afghanistan, etc. And that's why they're controlling that area as well. So basically, these people are blockading. The NATO is trying to blockade China and Russia from doing
basically business deals, as in primarily in gas and natural resources, with Middle Eastern countries.
This is a long game. This goes way beyond Assad's refusal to sign the dotted line on that particular gas deal from Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
That may have been the straw that broke the poor camel's back. But that was only one symptom of not the word. That was only one near-term factor in a much bigger chess game.
Right.
That's basically what we're saying here.
Right. And Syria is sitting in the middle of that big chess game and had to be dealt with. And Syria, because of its long-term association, long-term alliance with Russia, decided to stick to its guns and decided to take the moral path and say, okay, we're not going to screw. The Assad government literally said that we're not going to allow
Russia.
We're not going to, and we're not going to prevent Russia from, or we're not going to allow Qatari and Middle Eastern gas to subvert or to supplant Russian gas to Europe, because Europe is a big customer of Russia, and we're not going to facilitate or be a party to cutting off Russians' market to Europe by allowing Middle Eastern Qatari gas to get into Europe. And right in the middle of it, you also have Turkey there, and Turkey has to be managed very seriously. Syria is being managed. Syria was always just get rid of it. Get rid of Assad, that's it. To get rid of that government, and there's no way we're going to be able to deal with those people. They tried to back in 2002, 2003, and they got Blair when he faded Assad and his wife in London, and the Queen had them over for tea and crumpets at Buckingham Palace. That was 2002, and it was in the year or two after that when they realised that Assad wasn't budging. They started to prepare effectively what happened in 2011. But Turkey is a problem in that it's a NATO member, but it has to decide. It has long-standing ties, as we've mentioned, that have been ruined just this week with Russia. Russia supplies about 65 to 70% of Turkey's energy needs. And as Putin said, they were more or less an ally of Russia, even though they were a NATO member. NATO wanted them fully on board, effectively at the expense of Turkey. At the expense of any kind of nationalist, let's say, right-thinking Turkic government, effectively, who would have Turkey's interests at heart. Because there are other groups in there who don't really care, who are a bit crazy, like these right-wing nationalist Turkic-speaking people. They're just a joke, but they're being exploited, and they're dangerous because they can be exploited by NATO. So Turkey had to be forced to choose. And Turkey may have been prevaricating or being a bit ambivalent about the whole situation and not fully on board, was thinking it could plough its own course and even diverge from a NATO plan for Syria and for, like I said, for the Kurds, for creating a Kurdistan and part of Turkey. You probably wouldn't say that to Turkey, obviously, but the danger has always been there for Turkey. Obviously, Turkey has a long-standing problem with the Kurds wanting independence, and they're a big portion, they're about 15% of the Turkish population, and that has been the real thorn in Turkey's side for so long, and they've always been afraid of losing part of their territory. They saw, there are probably deals going on in that sense where Turkey said, listen, you're not going to do anything with Turkey here. You can give the Kurds part of Syria, part of Iraq, even if you want, but they're not getting part of Turkey, right? And even then, we're not very happy about the Kurds getting any kind of, unless you keep them fully under control. Okay, we'll go with it. But as things start to evolve, Turkey starts to get cold feet, starts to worry about the situation. And then in the middle of that, you have Turkey shooting down a Russian airplane. And then you have Erdogan's very strange behavior, flip-flopping from arrogant to pusillanimous.
And back again.
Wow.
Does Putin know all this?
Yeah.
So
the very fact Putin, look at it this way, the Russians are pretty much fully on board here, and that's why they were surprised. The fact that Russia knows in minute detail about what's going on is the fact that they were bombing that particular area. Grey Wolves organization right-wing Turkish nationalist organization that's run by NATO, that they were in that area. As we saw afterwards by the guy who came out and was shooting at the pilot. The fact that Russia is bombing that area where they are and that group is effectively a historical, has direct ties to Western U.S. NATO war on Russia in Chechnya, that they fought in Chechnya against Russian soldiers. And put it this way. The guy who shot down that Russian pilot, in the air as he was falling down, that guy, it's possible that he personally or one of his kin 15 years ago was shooting Russian soldiers in Chechnya.
Yeah.
So the fact that Russia was bombing him and his kind is no mistake. And it points to the fact that Russia has very good intelligence about what's going on the ground in the whole region, in Syria, in Turkey, all over the place. They know pretty much what's going on. What they didn't expect, and I think Putin's surprise and his statement about it being a stab in the back is genuine. They didn't expect Turkey to have any part or to be in a position where they could allow or they were not able to stop or were in some way kind of involved in shooting down of the Russian plane by a Turkish Air Force, that they were in some way involved in it, crazy enough to actually do it, or that they weren't able to stop it, that Erdogan has so little control over the situation, or that there's such a strong fifth element within the Turkish military and Turkish intelligence, i.e. a NATO element effectively, that Erdogan could not stop the shoot down of the Russian plane.
So in a way, his surprise is genuine.
Erdogan.
Putin's
is genuine, yes. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it seems like it was a very well-planned, sneaky attack from Turkish airspace. It didn't even come into Syrian airspace, and it was just a sneaky missile from their take down a Russian plane, and the result is, like we're saying, is that it sours the relationship between almost possibly irrevocably.
But does Russia not have a choice in tempering its retaliation? Its retaliation seems to be full bore.
These people, but these people are the people who are.
He's decided to hold Turkey responsible.
A big part of doing this, what these people, the strategy of these Western empire builders, an empire of chaos nut jobs, is very underhanded, very sneaky, very dirty. In that, if they can't attack you directly, if they can't just go in and bomb your country and kill you, which they can't do with Russia, obviously, they have other ways of getting at you, and it's kind of like a chess game in the sense of it's thinking a few steps ahead, and it requires you, who's being attacked, to think several steps ahead as well. It's a kind of mental martial arts almost, you know. And what they do is they will attack you in an asymmetric, non-linear, let's say, kind of way, and put you in a position where you have to do something. They shoot down a Russian passenger plane over Sinai. It doesn't really achieve much. Russia's not intimidated. It's pissed off. It's not intimidated. But it has to do something in response. It's got public opinion back at home.
Yeah.
The way that if they can't attack you directly, they'll attack your public effectively, or they'll try and influence you by influencing your public opinion back at home.
The British press and the American press were all, ISIS did it, while the Russians were quiet.
Right.
Here we are telling you how we're priming your public to accept this. Right.
And the same with the shoot down of the Russian bomber just this week. Russian public opinion was outraged, and the Russian government, Putin, has to respond to that in some way. You have to look like a strong leader, and you have to do and say all the right things, the things that the Russian people expect of you. You can't be seen to be weak. You know, you can't say, "Oh, but it doesn't matter." You can't. It doesn't matter. Of course, it matters. It matters to the Russian people. Therefore, it matters to you, Putin. So you better strike the right tone.
Right.
The same applies to Erdogan. The same applies to everybody. All of these kind of leaders, so-called leaders of the world, they all have to appear for public consumption to be strong, authoritative, etc.
Okay. In the short term, Russia has leveled the area in question in the northwest of Syria. They've also brought in S-400, which apparently gives them basically control of a no-fly zone over all of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Short term, isn't that something the Western powers that be would not want to see happen? Could they not have seen that coming? Because now they want to send in jets into an area in which the Russians can shoot them out of the sky instantaneously.
The people we're talking about here are people who would like to see some NATO jets shot out of the sky.
Okay. It's almost like a bait. Go on, Russia. You go right ahead and do that.
Yeah. These people are the transnational, global kind of elite who engage in manipulation of global opinion and have this broad game that they're playing and are untouched by any national kind of concerns, effectively, except that their agenda is being pushed, is being furthered. Their agenda for the whole world is being furthered. So small details about who gets shot down or who doesn't or who looks bad or, they don't care. And in fact, at a certain point, it's probably part of their plan to have some American plane shot down.
Yeah.
It's not an injury to them. They're not Americans in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
They're globalists, as Alex Jones would say, and they control the world, or they'd like to think they control the world. So they operate at that level. At the local level of manipulating popular opinion and public opinion by having terror attacks against ordinary people, at the level of overthrowing governments, and at the level of having one country fight against another, including their own seat of power type thing, because they are completely untouched by all of it. As long as the actions that they take, even if it's a self-inflicted wound, or appears to be a self-inflicted wound to their seat of power, as long as that furthers their agenda, because they see that when we attack ourselves in this way, 2 steps down the line, we're pushing our agenda forward.
Right.
As a result, when we take the responses, when we respond to the self-inflicted wound. Insecurity, they basically want insecurity everywhere. They thrive on chaos and everything just being...
It's strategy of tension on a global scale.
Right. I mean, the atmosphere, exactly. The atmosphere in any given country or in the world, if they can get to that point. For example, the atmosphere in the world, and particularly in France and in Europe, after the Paris attacks, these horrible Paris attacks where so many people were killed, there's a palpable sense, and this is true for any major kind of attack where people are screaming to kill, there's a palpable sense of insecurity.
Yeah.
And these people, in some way or other, feed on that. They enjoy it. They like it. That's when they're in the zone type thing, Mm-hmm. And then the more they can do that, the better for them. The more that's what they're striving for, to create as much chaos and insecurity amongst the ordinary people of this world as possible. They want an entire global climate of fear and insecurity, and
at which point people accept 20 or 30,000 troops patrolling the streets, all cafes and restaurants and museums shut down, not allowed to take any photos of what's going on, to the point where the mayor of Brussels said, after the third day of this, he goes, listen, can we scale down on this, because we're effectively turning the place I govern into an Islamic state, which is kind of not the direction we want to go in.
Right. No, well, it is.
It is for the powers that be.
Absolutely. It's kind of like wrecking these people. They've even used this term creative destruction, which is just like an oxymoron, but there you go, it's creative destruction. Well, they want to destroy the structures and infrastructures that have been set up that they themselves have played a part in setting up, and now they want to break it all down again. It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together and then wrecking it all so you can put it together in a different format.
Yeah.
And you have to wreck it first before you can be creative.
And it works for them, because the last time they created, say, the Middle East, they did it after having wrecked the place And in that situation, you've got mass unrest and stress, terror, and that's the ideal time in which to reconfigure and recreate it.
Right.
So, yes, the payoff is in the terror.
Absolutely. These people feed on it, you know. It seems to be their food, effectively, and it's pretty horrible. I mean, there's no other way to explain it, really, when you see what they do, you know.
The Western leaders, I mean, the actual politicians, are all gung-ho this week about doing their bit to defeat ISIS in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see going on here? I mean, the Brits are like, we absolutely must bomb Syria. We just must. Because today they're saying we're in danger. Like, Britain's being threatened by IS in Syria. The Germans are talking about sending 1,200 Air Force personnel to either Turkey or Jordan. Presumably, yes, they would help the French, who are already there. Yeah, what's going on here? I mean, are they going to... They can't... Oh, maybe they can. Maybe in light of what you just said, the situation is perfectly ripe for a Russian to take down a French jet or a British or Russian and vice versa. The problem I have with this is it could easily create a situation that gets out of their control, no?
In what respect?
Say a country in the Middle East. Iraq seems to be the next one to fall, so to speak, into Russia's sphere of influence.
Yeah.
I mean, that could happen any day now, no?
Absolutely. Yeah.
At which point your Kurdistan project just took a hit. Because the Iraqis will be all the more determined to consolidate their territorial sovereignty.
Mm.
To hell with an independent Kurdistan.
It's gone wrong for them as soon as Russia, it went wrong for them as soon as Russia started intervening directly in Syria. And they're having to, at this point, make it up as they go along.
Yeah, in terms of the narrative, like Stephen was saying in the call earlier, what can they do? Obama's talking about sending nearly $1 billion worth of weapons into Syria. A lot of people, if not masses of people, but a lot of people know what he means. He's going to send it to the people Russia is bombing. What are they hoping to get at? They're going to try and meld the narrative so that Russia is doing what we're doing and what we've been doing all along, and it's going to work. People are going to accept that. At the narrative level now.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing at this point is, you notice that they went to Vienna for these talks, these possible peace talks, and there's going to be more next year, early next year. Peace talks about a solution for Syria. And what you're seeing right now is each of the interested parties kind of doing as much as they possibly can to influence the situation in their favor, in lieu of or in advance of having to sit down and talk about it. Because when you sit down and talk, when these people sit down with Russia, NATO and Turkey and whoever else sit down at the table, they're going to have to say what they'll present is effectively their facts on the ground. And that will be their argument for their position. There's no point in saying, well, I'd like to have this happen. Russia can't say, well, I would like for, these elements of the Assad government to be in the new government if nobody in the Assad government's there anymore. Can I bring them back? No, we defeated them. They're gone. The NATO can't say, well, we're insisting that this happens, like that these representatives of the moderate rebels take a position. If first of all they're dead, or there's no one to pick from, and secondly, if they don't hold any territory in Syria, if they're all gone.
Yeah.
If you get to a situation where if Russia continues long enough and the Assad government is still intact and the Syrian army controls all of the Syrian territory, NATO and Turkey won't even come to the meeting. There'll be no meeting that we had. You know, the only situation where you would have an actual discussion about what's going to happen in a new Syrian government, a discussion between competing parties, is if they all have some skin in the game type of thing, if they all have leverage.
Right.
So at this point, with this threat effectively of having to sit down at a table to negotiate, which is what NATO hates the most, they're doing their utmost to control as much of the situation as possible, so they have as much negotiating power as possible to get what they want out of it. Now, I mean, I can't imagine how it would actually work, but maybe Putin's
blowing the hell out of their facts on the ground.
I know, but you know, the American, the British, there's British, which is kind of indicative if there's anything serious about it. Some British general, who's an active general, not one of these retired ones, but an active one, said that the Brits are going to need boots on the ground. Right. To defeat ISIS. Now, if they're
daring Vlad to come bomb them,
well, that's their trump card, effectively, which is put NATO troops
as human shields.
Yeah, effectively in the country, and then say, okay, that could call a halt. That could be a trump card to call a halt at a time of their choosing. Call a halt to the whole situation. To stop the war, effectively, will be put a bunch of NATO troops in there. And then there's no more bombing and everything has to come to a halt. I mean, the big threat that NATO has over Russia is war with NATO, war with any NATO country. Any kind of aggression between the Russian military and a NATO country military. And that's what they're holding over the Russians' head, effectively. That's their trump card. Of course, no NATO country wants that to happen, including the U.S. government. But like we've been talking about, there is this supranational clique who is effectively a wild card, and you don't know if they would be willing to go there type of thing, you know, to really push it, because they know that Putin and Russia is effectively a peace-loving country. And that's their weakness. Their weakness, as far as NATO, as far as this supranational, transnational elite is concerned, that's Russia's weakness, and they will kind of prod and provoke and threaten Russia effectively with the threat of war, some kind of a serious kind of Cuban Missile Crisis type situation, you know, where there's seems to be a real possibility that the governments of Russia and some other NATO country, Germany or France or the UK or something, would be really put in a position where they would find it difficult to back down, you know. And again, that's insecurity and fear around the world, and that's what this kind of elite seem to enjoy, you know. But they play this kind of stealthy game where they push it and then back off and then push it and back off. They seem to have the kind of goal. But of course, I'm not saying that they're all powerful. And these kind of people can and will and do make mistakes. And ultimately, I think they'll fail. But they can do a lot of damage
in failing
in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we got a few good answers there.
Right.
For Stephen and all our listeners.
Yeah, I think we're going to leave it there for this week, folks. Till next week. We'll be back at the same time, same place. Thank to you guys for listening and participating in the chat room. I hope you have a good evening.
Thanks, y'all. See you next week. Bye-bye.